Hey folks, Sin here. So today I wanted to take a look at an existing deck. Um, so in the previous video, we took an idea, um, started fresh, and kind of made a combo deck. This deck that we'll look at today is a Jeskai Control Dragon deck. I got the idea from this from a match I played against back in July on ladder, and the deck I went up against ended up not really being what I have here, but I kind of took the color scheme and I wanted to play around with having a dragon deck, which had control elements in them. So this is what we came up with. So as you can see here, we have red, white, and blue for our color scheme. We're running some Galazeth, Velomachus, and Goldspans. None of them are a full playset. The idea here isn't really focused around the dragons. It's mostly about clearing the pathway with Doom Scars in the early game, having a little counter backup between Jawari and Saw It Coming, doing some ramp with Goldspan. It's really not meant to be the kill switch here. Neither is Galazeth. They're really a means to an end for the deck. They're there to power up for our Velomachus. And then from there, we want to be casting Loreholds and Opuses. So early on in the game, we try to keep it locked down and swept, right? Professor of Symbology for a learn board helps us with color fixing. Pop out our learn board here. So it helps us with some color fixing if we have issues with indestructible enchantment that we need to get rid of, Skeleton Swarm, for example. This Lorn board gives us additional tools that we can call on to answer some of those problems. And it serves as a chump block in the earlier mid game, sometimes even late game. We really don't care if any of these guys live usually. It's usually fine if any of those make it on the board, kind of give us the edge that we need at that time. And then our real end game is in this area, right? Velomachus, Lorehold, Command, and Opuses. Everything else is really there just to disrupt, sweep, keep our board clean, ramp, and then into our end game. So the the tricky thing about this is it's not heavy on any particular aspect, right? So it's not leaning super into counter. It's not leaning super into removal and burn. We have some of that with Rip Apart, Prismari Command, but it's not very heavy on any of those. We don't have a ton of dragons. So it's a very tempo-oriented deck that takes a lot of planning when you're playing the match. Sometimes the right answer is to Doomscar while you have a couple dragons out. It depends on the context. This deck is heavily reliant on the game context, what's happening at that moment, what you anticipate the opponent has, and adjusting your game plan based on whatever you can glean from how they're playing, what colors they're playing, and kind of assess that situation and make your plan for how you're going to close the game out. Sometimes we take very little damage, other times we're down at 1 or 2 life, and then we stabilize. The deck is not just a casual deck, it's pretty competitive. Recently played it in a tournament for the Mythras Multiverse. Came in 3rd or 4th overall, depending on how a final match shakes out. And on the ladder, between myself and a few others on Discord, it performs very well. So it's not just because we're brewing and coming up with something a little different doesn't mean that like in our last video we have to be just for fun. We can brew something that's a little unusual or kind of like other things, but still can hang at a competitive level. So that's what we have here. From a mana base perspective, it's a very tricky one also because of the color mix and costs that we have going on. So our land looks like it's kind of all over the place, and it is, but there's a good reason for that, and hopefully you will see that in the games. So just to recap again, really it's a control deck with some teeth, right? It's we're not using epiphanies or any of the common blue end game tools. We're not using just creatures hoping that we control and then dump a bunch of creatures and go to town that way. It's kind of this mix between all these spaces to thread a couple different needles depending on the game, the opponent, what's happening, right? So with that, let's take it for a spin, show you guys how this does. Of course I start with Sparky, so we'll back out of this game.
I was worried there for a minute.
All games are valid games, but we'll take it on the ladder and see how she does. So the best matchups for this typically are like a mono white list. We do pretty good against green. The troublesome decks are like Grixis control. We do pretty good against Mardu and Rakdos. Those usually have enough creatures that they play into our suite too much. They don't really have a choice, and then by then it's kind of too late. Alright, so we'll start with a red. Hopefully we draw into some white soon. Black white on the opponent. Get our Doomscar foretold. Waiting in the wind. So it looks like so far we are up against a relatively classic start for anything running black right now. With the white edition, it likely is running Kaya. So now they have mana straight up available to get a Kaya down. with the black base, the treasure base these days, it's not unusual to see Deadly Dispute, so that's likely to be coming as well. So we could have played this as a land. Right now, depending on what they do, if they don't dispute and don't have a land, they just try to go for a Kaya, for example, or a Lolth. That would give us an actual counter out of it. So we'll hang on to it. We're not super pressed on life yet. Alright, so let's make a treasure token. And we will blow up theirs. Keep them below the blood in the snow threshold. It's fine. Getting all the doom scars. None of the white. So I'm gonna sacrifice that treasure to get a professor out. We'll leave up the no, we won't be leaving that up. We're gonna hunt for the color we need. So we missed too many land drops. White. So there's one. We just need another one. Okay, so they might just make a -1. Yeah, just kill that. See what they do from here. Delicious coffee. Okay. So typically we would have drawn into land by now. This starts a little unusual for the deck. If anything, it typically it's running more land than normal. So we would have seen, even if they're not the right color, just more land. So it's a little bizarre that we're so light so far, but that's all right. I'll press through. So we don't have any more environmental. We only run one each of the basics. So from here we will grab a teaching. Hopefully we get lower than them. If not, oh well. So next turn at least we could try to get out a gold span if we need to. Okay. 3 open. It's not really worth it necessarily to try to counter that.
Envy the strong, for they consume
If they
a
have
gift in exchange for loyalty.
I'm just gonna let that through. We're not really concerned about our life total in that way. So if they have a soul shatter, trying to do that counter would have been effective. So my point right there. So if we had used this there, they would have only had 2 open. They wouldn't have been able to do the soul shatter. So that's a little unfortunate, but these are the gambles you need to take sometimes.
Go, my children.
And unfortunately, if we just Doomscar now, the Lolth gets powered up, right? It's gonna get a loyalty counter from each of these creatures. So it doesn't really help us that much. So what we really should do instead is try to kill the Lolth first. Unfortunately, we're probably, depending on what they do, if they just go for that mascot, we might have a chance here. If not, they can just power up a land and they'll have 2 menace, right? So 4, 5, and then there's 3 more attackers. I can block 1 of them. So they have lethal.
You'll win this round, but I'll be waiting for you.
Kind of regardless at that point. So let's just do another foretell, and we'll see if they see the lethal attack or not. If not, hopefully they go for that mascot. Okay, can't really do anything about that, so that's pretty much it. We could have used the Jawari, but they had the 1 to pay, so that was ineffective. Yeah. And that's the game, folks. Okay. So defeats are as important as victories. Whether you're playing casually or competitively, you're going to lose at some point. Kind of interesting hand. So it's important to keep that in mind, right? When you have a loss, how did you lose? What was it that was not working? In that last game, basically we just didn't get the land at the beginning. If we had, things would have turned out a lot differently, but we just couldn't draw into our land. So sometimes you have the proper amount of land. There's nothing really to change about it. Other times, you know, maybe you were trying to run lean on your land count because you really want, you know, this, you know, a 4-set of this, or, you know, these 2 things really seem like they'll be great for the deck, but in practice that may not actually be working out for you, right? So playing is just as much about you know, adjusting based on what you are seeing. Is this working? Is this not working? Where do we go from here? That all comes into play, right? Okay, so it would be great if we draw into Doomscar. If not, then we have lore hold up. The opponent has a pretty strong board though, so this is going to be a difficult push either way. Wait, so we have some more red and blue here. So we're gonna pass and let them play, and then depending on what they do, we're going to choose what we use the lore hold to kill, and then how we distribute block after that. Alright, so this works out fairly well. We're gonna kill that Skyclave, make a 3-2. That's gonna make a 4-4 for us on that kill. Unless they have a trick to prevent killing of the apparition there. They do not. So we did it before the attack. So if they want to trade in, they can. If not, on our next turn, we will have the ability to take another one out. Or wait for the next round cycle, depending on what we draw into. So we'll kind of see where we land there. Otherwise, more commonly, you would probably see. It's a pretty good attack. You would probably see that done during the attack phase, so that they're already locked into the attack. But if we did that, then they've already distributed the counters, so actually killing something is more difficult at that point. Alright, so now, unfortunately, they have that flyer on that land, so even if we kill both of those, we can't gain enough to survive. So we are probably dead on this next turn, depending on what they do, if they want to play something or not. Yeah, I'm just gonna go for it. Makes sense. That's what I would do. So we'll just make a guy anyway. So unfortunately we're still short. Doesn't really matter if they give anything a counter or not. Pressing on. Okay, so this is a pretty good start. We're gonna keep this. We'll start with a snarl into the white side of that pathway. Bring our symbology on a white. Okay, we will foretell instead. Okay. We're gonna need this quickly. So the problem here is if we don't have another untapped land in hand yet, so hopefully going to draw into one. If not, we're going to take another round of whatever beating they want to give us. So Saved by the Bell. Alright, so obviously we're gonna Doomstar here. There's really no other option. Okay, so we have no blue. We're gonna start with that one. Bring down our Professor of Symbology. Grab Sciences. Okay. Alright, so let's start with so we could iteration here. The problem with that is if we do, we may not come into red, so we can rip apart. We're gonna need to get rid of one of these things. So instead we will Sciences. Grab another red. Then rip apart. Usher. Okay, so we can cast the Doomscar itself, which we'll do. We'll bring that tap land in. So we may have just stabilized here. The opponent kind of played their whole hand, as it were. Now, thankfully, yeah, we can get our Velomachus out. We got rolling with a lore hold, gain some life, get another blocker. There wasn't really much that particular deck could do. This one is, just like any other aggressive deck. If you can withstand that onslaught, chances are, once you stabilize, if you get to that point, you can take the game back, and that's exactly what we did here. Kind of like I said earlier, for good matchups for this, right? It may look like you're about to lose, but this deck is kind of built to have enough of those answers in different ways, so that as you try into them against these aggressive decks, you can stabilize at that critical point where they're low on hand, and you're now getting 5, 6, 7 mana. You can drop your low core holds, your gold span, your Velomachus here, and really start counterattacking. So each deck that you work with, that you build, whether you built it, someone else built it, you're tuning it, whatever it is you're doing, there, the main archetypes, control, aggro, mid range, that just kind of scratches the surface, right? Just like any other game or strategy driven activity, it's there's a lot of nuance even in an aggro deck or a mid-range deck. There's a lot of things that can sway a game one way or another depending on if you play something at this key juncture or you don't, or you're paying attention to what the opponent's doing in this situation or that situation. um, all those things add up to make this unique web of the game that you're playing that turn, that round, and each one is different. So that that's something to keep in mind and embrace. It's one of the things I love about the game is it's different each time. It's new. It's uh, never never something you're going to just know all the answers to all the time. There's each one is a unique experience, each game you play. So our opponent's starting with blue. They could be playing several different things with that kind of start, so that doesn't really tell us much. Um, we'll do an archaics here, just so we can try to draw through some of this land here. And hopefully by the time it matters, we'll just kind of be waiting with some counter and other tools. Right, so we're going to use that for white, but we want to have a counter available. So we will not foretell, we'll just kind of keep that to ourselves. So here we can just use a dweller. We don't have an additional to pay for it, so we don't need to waste a slot coming on that. And really that's what that would be, just a waste. So swing in, return. Depending on what they do, we might lower hold on their end step. Or just counter another Super Chariot. Okay. So normally you almost never counter something like expressive iteration, behold the multiverse, the draw spell. It's almost never worth it, but there are exceptions to every rule, and the don't counter draw is one of them. Sometimes Deadly Dispute is a good example. If the opponent is kind of running dry on mana and they're really, you can tell they're really hoping that Deadly Dispute is going to be the thing that gets them the draw, gets them some extra mana, gets them back on track, and you shut that down, that can break the game right there. So it's important, again, as always, to pay attention to what's going on, understand your opponent's board state and what they're hoping to do. So like this one is getting desperate, right? they're going for everything, and they had no protection. They went for the Epiphany, and we had an answer for it. Even though our board state did not look impressive, we didn't really cast much. We had teachings, a couple counters, and a lore hold. Just looking at this board, this doesn't look very threatening. But if you disrupt in the right places at the right time, that can be the difference between being on the opponent's side of the table versus ours right now. This kind of deck thrives on that interaction, understanding those nuances and those tempo plays, and that takes a lot of practice, a lot of games. I'm not perfect at it. I'm not going to pretend that I'm the best player on the planet or know all the answers, but um, playing. I've been playing since I was a kid in the mid '90s. You get a feel for things, right? But that takes practice. You have to play the game. You have to pay attention. You have to focus on your opponent. Um, a lot of times when I play, I notice opponents at the time don't even necessarily know what I have on the board beyond just looking at the card. Um, you can tell like we have a reader, right? As some people say, when the opponent is suddenly studiously looking at your cards, they're hovering over them to figure out what the heck just happened, because they're not familiar with what you're doing. And if they're reading after you have done something, it's probably a little too late to counteract whatever it was that you just did. Um, so that's why it's important to pay attention. If someone casts something that you don't know, never seen before, look at it. Take a second and read it. You're not going to learn unless you figure that out. Okay, so here we could go white and then just Doomscar, but it's a little early for that. We want them to play into the Doomscar more. So hopefully they will not just they're just gonna buff. It's a smart play. So now they can just buff up their creature here. Right, so we will bring that down and we're going to rip apart the Ranger class. We want to try to draw a couple more things onto the board and then Doomscar because they have a pretty full hand. Our opponent is smart though, so they're not playing into our quite obvious ploy. Okay, so we don't really have a choice. We'll Doomsky. It doesn't help us that much, really. The Faceless alone is going to do 4, unless they just want to rebuild board. Okay. Goldspan, not super helpful. 5, 6. Doesn't really give us much of anything. Swing in for those. Right, so we will just Doomscar, get rid of the cat tokens. Hopefully now they'll try to play into that so they can power up a Sika, maybe counter. If not, then we're just going to take 4 to the face. We're taking 4 to the face. Okay, that's bizarre and serves no purpose. Okay. Alright. Sure. Okay, so again, we don't really have much of an option here. Put the gold span out, chump it if we're if we're allowed to. They'd very likely have a fight spell, so okay. Good game, opponent. So let's take a look at our deck here. So I know the run wasn't super impressive, but depending on the matchup and kind of what you're seeing on the ladder, the deck does better than it was showing off today. Um, it has a lot of stickiness. If you get into turn 5 and you're not at about to die, they don't have leaf on board, and you have no answers. If you get to that point, the deck really starts turning on. Um, so it could be tweaked. We could go down on maybe some Doom Scars and maybe take out the Rip Aparts and focus more on uh, Gazeth and more gold spans to help ramp faster. Um, or we could take the opposite approach and kind of take the Galazeth out and maybe one of the gold spans or both. Maybe go up to 3 Velomachus and then add in more counter support, more sweepers like Devastating Mastery. So just because you have the deck and it's working over X period of time, if it stops being effective and it's still something you want to play, just pay attention to the games. That's kind of the whole idea about everything we're doing here is to show the reality of Magic, which is one, it's a game. It's fun if you have fun doing it. So if you're not having fun, find something about it that is fun and do that if that's possible. And if you're not having fun with a deck or any decks, uh, don't be afraid to tweak some stuff. If you're running into a whole lot less things that need sweepers, and your deck has a pretty large sweeper count, suite of sweepers, then think about what would be more effective against what you're running into. If you're running into a lot more control that's creature light, uh, you know, Doom Scars aren't really going to help you there. So ripping these out and putting in a full Sonic Cummings play set, putting in excuse me, putting in some more draw with Behold the Multiverse might be a good option. So that's the the whole process. No deck is ever complete, and just like people, the game is constantly evolving. The meta shifts even when it seems relatively static. There are variances in how much a particular deck is being played, what other content creators are doing or showcasing. You tend to see spikes in those types of decks or that specific deck. So, one week the ladder and the game may be really focused on a lot of aggro heavy decks and play, and then a bunch of content creators get sick of playing against that and release, maybe some Demir Control and Azorius and whatever, these control focused decks, and then suddenly you just can't stop running into that ladder. And if your deck or the decks that you have are focused for aggro matchups, when you run into all this control, that's not going to go so well. Your deck performance is going to go down. So it doesn't mean you just give up or you have a bad deck. Pay attention to what's happening and try to adjust. Maybe make a copy of your deck if you want to keep the original, and make one that's you keep your original and make one that's more focused towards handling the new flavor of the meta, while the overall top decks haven't changed. Maybe, like I said, directionally things are a little different. So um, those are the things that can make the game insufferable or still enjoyable if you are able to pay attention to those things, keep pace. Um, Sometimes it's even taking the decks that are being featured and putting your own spin on them, running them just the way they are, whatever that is. If it's not fun, don't do it, right? So it should be fun. If you have fun through building or tweaking or whatever, that's great. Don't don't forget to do that, and don't say just because you have a deck and it worked perfectly for a week that it's untouchable. Nothing's untouchable. Um, Everything transforms at some point. So don't be afraid. Enjoy your creations, other people's creations. Have fun with it. That's what this is all about, or should be. So with that, I will leave you for the day. Uh, Hope you come back soon. If you like the video, please hit the like and subscribe button. You can find me on Discord and the website. And I'll repeat, like in the first video, please give me any deck ideas, any combos, cards, whatever you guys want to see built, twisted, thought around, tuned with, whatever it is. Uh, it's about the community, so I want to show everyone's ideas and make this something that everyone owns, and hopefully we can all learn together new uh, new avenues for creating attack, new ideas, new combos, and all will kind of get that experience together. So thanks again. Have a great and excellent day wherever you are.